topic is natural gas pricing. Energy is obviously critical to our economy and the economy of every other country. It's critical to all aspects of human endeavor. Natural gas is a key element in the energy world, and it has become a far bigger element than it was a few decades ago. Natural gas is also, I would say, a little bit unique in that it could be said to be both part of the problem and part of the solution. It's obviously a fossil fuel, contributes carbon when it burns, but it's a very low cost fossil fuel, and it's a very low emission fossil fuel when compared to things like coal and oil. So it's in, like I say, somewhat of a unique position in the energy world. In North America, in what's recently happened last winter was an extremely cold and vicious winter. More people in North America died from the weather than any time in almost 20 years. The cost within the US, the cost of the cold winter is the highest ever, generally regarded at around $22 billion, which is an enormous amount of money for a season. So natural gas prices have risen. The supplies, the inventory has fallen as a result of the extended use of it. And it raises some interesting questions. And there's obviously other effects other factors that drive the energy market inflation. There's things happening overseas. There's other things domestically. There's obviously not just economic things, but social and governmental things that affect pricing as well. So it raises some interesting questions as to whether there's going to be an extended inflationary period due to the increase in natural gas prices, or if what we're seeing here, and that's something on which some pretty high-level economists have differed, including, if I recall, Larry Summers, former president of Harvard, and one of the major economists in the country, and the current head of the Fed, one of whom thinks that we're going to have some serious longer-term inflationary effects in the economy. The other of whom believes that what we're seeing is temporary. So David Edick is going to inform us on the facts for natural gas, how it interplays in the market, and how it's going to be affecting inflation. So a few words on David himself, our speaker. David and I have known each other, I don't know exactly, I think it's probably 10 or 12 years, David, if I recall. David is always a great person to talk to on a number of different subjects: international finance, oil and gas, international affairs, business affairs. And we've had him speak at the Fang a couple of times before, and are definitely glad to be having him again. By the way, can people still see me, or is my image gone?
We can still see you, Dan.
You can hear me okay? Okay, I'm seeing funny stuff on my smartphone screen. Okay.
In your voice.
So David is a principal in Core Global Advisory, which is a consultancy that focuses on risk management, energy, oil and gas, and commodities, and international political risk. David has had over 30 years of experience doing that kind of thing, over 15 years of experience giving talks, public talks in groups like the Fang. David's experience has included living overseas. He lived and worked in Russia for a while, and in fact speaks fluent Russian. He's lived and worked in Mexico. He's on the energy committee of the, let me get this name right, the, hang on a second here. I'm sure I can read this. The Western Regional Partnership, which is a joint operation of the Department of Defense, a number of other federal agencies, and a number of tribal leadership groups in the the 6 states of the southwestern US. David is a 3-term past president of the San Diego World Affairs Council. And in fact, it was David who got me onto the board of the World Affairs Council several years ago. I think that was a good thing. David has also been a 6-time past president of the San Diego Sister Cities program and 7-time past president in particular of the Vladivostok Sister Cities program, which I believe Dave may have implemented himself. Those are just a few of the things David has done, pretty wide experience, and in particular, wide experience with global business, diplomatic global affairs, and international risk management. So let me turn it over to Dave. Take it away, David.
We're not hearing him.
David,
I'm not hearing
you're
him.
not muted, but we are not hearing you.
He doesn't seem to be muted in the system.
Can you hear me?
There we go.
All right. Okay, so it's a pleasure to be here this morning. Little technical difficulties along the way, but gladly resolved. Beautiful morning here in San Diego. Well, let's get into it. So I'm gonna screen share. All right. So Dan invited me last week to give a presentation to the Financial Executives Networking Group. The hot topic in my world right now is the global natural gas crunch, really centered on Europe. Inflation, well, those of you that pay attention to the world of commodities or logistics or hiring know that there's really considerable amount of lift in prices all through the economy. The theory has been from some that it was transitory. I think it's increasingly clear that the price increases are very much embedded and becoming more so. And now with what is going to be a shock, a natural gas price shock feeding through electricity and all in Europe, and to some degree in the United States and Asia, will only add to that lift. But I think really it's the inflation thing is a longer term issue, maybe measured in months and years. The natural gas crunch in Europe is immediate and has the prospect to be quite a serious thing that could take up a lot of news space in the weeks and months to come. Okay, let me shift some things around here. Just to give you a sense of what the kind of drama that has emerged in something that's usually a pretty boring or at least sedate world of energy. When things get exciting in the world of energy, that's really rarely a good thing. You want consistency and reliability. Drama, well, it's great for trading, and sometimes it's great for investing, but you better have if you're investing, you better have your parachute on as well. The back end of these things can be pretty exciting also. But this just a quick look here in the UK, a really dramatic price spike in electricity in the last few days. It's been building for a while, but it's really gotten dramatic, where prices are now 700% higher than a 10-year average. Okay, and for nighttime here, and these are really immediate statistics. I put this presentation together essentially yesterday, and pretty much everything is either yesterday or within a week. And our fellow in the UK has got a front row seat for this. A beautiful sunny day that looks like he's lived through, indicating weak wind output, which has been a big problem, not just in the UK, which is also dealing with natural gas maintenance, as pointed here. But in the evening, prices are really nuts. And these bills, these prices, while to some degree are spot, many are not, they will feed through to ordinary people, ordinary consumers paying their bills, into businesses where energy is part of their cost structure. In Germany, a year ahead, looking forward, so not really so much a spot figure. It gives you an indication of just how dramatic this move in pricing is. And again, it started earlier this year, but it's just taken off. A look at gas prices in Germany are basically triple of what they normally would be. This chart here showing, remember, the way dates are written in Europe is different in the US. The day followed by the month, followed by the year. So to give some, within the world of natural gas, there is a regrettably kind of a blizzard of different ways of measuring natural gas prices. And figure here of $62, 62 euros for a megawatt hour. Most Americans are not used to measuring gas in megawatt hours. We'll do cubic feet. I live in a world that's mostly cubic meters. And just for kind of a quick reference here, in the lower right-hand corner, this 62 euros for megawatt hour, yesterday's price for gas in Germany is equivalent of about $116 a barrel. It's a messy conversion, but it gives you an idea of just how dramatic things are.
Wow. Hey, David, a quick question. Does Germany get a significant portion of its gas from Russia?
All of Europe gets a significant portion of gas from Germany or from Russia. I'll cover that in a bit here. So yeah, for a little comedy here, yeah, we're going to the moon. So just a cursory check here this morning, gas prices in Europe are up 7%. So the price move since August 1st is about 60%. I can't tell you what's happened in the last hour, 90 minutes or so, but it's really quite amazing what's going on. And for business people, and this very much for politicians, this is getting to be scary times. So in this presentation, I'm going to quickly touch on uses, sources, the new challenges for boring, sedate natural gas, soaring prices. We have the impact of carbon pricing, which is something that was the discussion point for most of the year, was how gas, either through leakage, methane leakage, or its carbon footprint, or is it a bridge fuel, or what its role in a renewables based energy system, that's all being sidelined by the consequences of a cold winter this last year, all through the Northern Hemisphere, epic cold in Northeast Asia. We had some pretty wild experiences here in the United States, of course, and cold weather in Northern Europe. Currently, well, this has been a really poor year for wind output in Northern Europe, and that's kind of the backbone of the renewables space in Europe. Germany, UK, and also all across Northern Europe have had weak wind conditions. It happens, but it's happening at an inconvenient time for many, and it's kind of a wake-up call to the facts of intermittency. Drought conditions in Brazil and China. Yeah, the pandemic rebound in Asia is helping demand for gas, particularly in China, but not only in China. Secular growth of gas in China as coal is being phased out in municipal boilers to deal with the air pollution problem that we had previously heard so much about. And then the substituting for coal, particularly here in the United States, but also in Europe. And on the supply side, we've got the deferred maintenance issue because of the pandemic. And you can only get away with deferring maintenance in the world of oil and gas or energy before things start breaking at inconvenient times. Teething problems in Australia's new LNG fields has had a, while their projects have essentially come online now, it's been a difficult process. And the arrival of those supplies has been slower than expected. It's kind of created a drag on the system. The LNG plant up in Hammerfest in northern Norway had a fire, unexpected, 7.5 million tons offline. Insects built up on an air filter. Talk about maintenance. That thick mat of insects caught fire. This plant is out of commission, maybe for another year. The Texas freeze off. Okay, for those of you that are in Texas, you got to experience it all. This is a real wake-up call for energy policy in terms of national security, et cetera. It really was a shock at just how pronounced that was. It not only affected everybody in Texas, but it affected LNG exports and affected, there was a tremendous amount of gas that was pulled out of storage to cover that shortfall. Oil production here in the US has been weak. It's recovered. The pandemic really hammered the world of shale. And while the oil production has recovered, it's far from where it was at the beginning of 2020. And much gas is produced associated with that oil in the Permian, for example. And the supplies there have been limited. And we'll talk a bit about the very interesting situation in Russia. One of the important takeaways from this and from this entire experience, it's a takeaway from the Texas freeze off, where electricity is priced at marginal cost. It was a devastating blow in Texas to the consumer as the price of natural gas and electricity went into the stratosphere, and the bills that are being faced by people to pay and the politicians to defend. But the marginal cost pricing is a risky thing, and it's poorly understood by politicians and environmental advocates, a lot of people as well. Then I'll take a look at the outlook where things are going here. So, all right. In particular, I want to draw attention to the top two lines in this graphic. The white one being Asia LNG spot price, dragging the European TTF price higher. Australian coal prices have been lifting. Chinese coal prices have been lifting. Henry Hub. What's interesting is that the oil prices are, after an interesting first half, have really flattened out. So Europe's natural gas supply, and this, Dan, gets to your question a bit. This is old statistics, unfortunately, on this particular graphic, but I can tell you that domestic production across Europe has continued to decline. The imports from Russia are about 35% of market. Imports from Norway are around 25% of market. So anybody that thinks that the Russians have got a monopoly in Europe, and it's not the case. Politics have invaded this space really to an amazing degree. LNG is continued to expand. It was very strong at the beginning, a decade ago, and it's coming back now. I don't have an immediate set of figures for you. So take a look at demand here in the U.S. And really what I want to get at here is the role of gas in electric power. So blue, the brown here is industrial. The yellow, commercial, say like, heating and cooling and office space, and residential heating and cooling, hot water, things like that. But this blue is the gas used to produce electricity. In Europe, gas is used to produce electricity. Let's use this 2020 number as the one to ride with. But gas is very important as a fuel for in the commercial world and in the industrial world. In Asia, gas is more important as a generator of electricity. Take a look at Japan. We could talk about the role of Fukushima a few years ago, but Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, I think is a great baseline indicator. And then for Latin America, it's very much the same. Chile, for example. Other parts of Latin America are very heavily dependent on hydropower. Brazil, Venezuela, other countries. It's one of the things you could get a big World Bank loan on, was to build a dam to generate electricity. And while it's green and it's renewable, when it doesn't rain, you've got a problem. And in the big industrial area, the triangle in southeast Brazil, and in northeast Brazil, it's been very, very dry. And this purple line gives you an indication of the shortfall in stored hydro capacity in Brazil. And they are covering up the difference with importing LNG, which is an unexpected tightening. So this on the this chart here gets back to the UK. Over on the left side in the yellow, showing the performance of wind. Really, this is the dominant factor here, the ebb and flow. The UK's domestic gas production is down almost a quarter, between 20-25% from this time last year. Really, a lot of it's due to maintenance. That could be foreseen with to some degree. What is harder to forecast with any length of time is wind, and things in the UK are running on a pretty fine edge right now. And then one of the consequences of running things on a fine edge is when things don't work perfectly, things can get very expensive or tricky. Carbon pricing is an underlying factor to pricing of electricity. This is a bit of an old chart here, the orange on the right showing euros per ton of carbon, the carbon market. Thing is, prices have doubled on the carbon market here in just the last few months in Europe to over 60 euros a ton. This was going to be a significant headwind anyways, and certainly was part of the rising electricity prices earlier this year in Europe. But now rising prices for natural gas and for coal are really complicating things. So underlying this price surge is real storage problems worldwide, very much in Europe, Russia, and the United States. The United States, we're down about 7–8% on where we'd normally be at this time of year. And storage is important in the wintertime, where demand far exceeds the ability of production facilities to supply. So it's possible to surge supply from storage facilities to consumers. That's the way to respond to surges in demand. The physical production at fields is not, they're not able to scale up production to meet those kinds of seasonal ebbs and flows, or spikes for that matter. In Europe, inventories are way low. Last year, they were way high. What a year. What, it's amazing in the world of energy what a difference a year makes. Last summer, LNG production and sales out of the US Gulf Coast were in free fall, cancellation of cargoes everywhere. Now people can't get enough of this stuff. But coming back to Europe, these low inventories are a real problem, and it's urgent that they be filled because you get in the middle of the winter and you're not able to respond to demand. You can get some really terrible price spikes or some real life situations. The dark red is the current year for LNG storage. LNG, figure just for maybe 10% of European demand. It's important, and particularly at the...
Yes, I am.
Hello. So that's weak as well. Now coming to
I'm here, sorry.
So Russia is an important supplier of natural gas to Europe, with about 35% of the total market. And Gazprom has significant gas storages in Europe to participate in the seasonal ebb and flow in case there are problems with pipelines. I mean, this is what companies, big companies do. And the business with Europe is strategic and crucial for Gazprom. What is striking is the collapse in inventories, so and not filling them. This is definitely unusual. There's been talk about a change in Gazprom strategy, but I think it's also indicating something else. And this. So Russia had a cold winter as well. A number of cold shocks. And over here on the on the right, you can see that the storage inventories in Russia are far short of where they would normally be at this time of year. This is serious business. I have long experience in Russia, and essentially the third rail of Russian politics is winter. You don't mess with winter, and as would be the case in most countries, when there's a shortfall you take care of your locals first. And what is taking place now is while Gazprom is meeting all of its contracted supplies and some, any incremental gas available is going into storage in Russia. And they've been having their maintenance issues as well. We'll get into some additional issues in Russia, but this is really big time stuff here. There's been a lot of chatter about the arrival of Nordstream II and how that's going to open the doors to more gas from Russia, as if you know the Russians had all this excess capacity sitting around waiting for somebody to call on it, waiting for somebody in Europe to call on it. Well, it doesn't work that way. Excess capacity is expensive. You don't generate any revenue from it, and you do generate costs and economic supply in Russia just as much as they do anywhere else. So the reality is that the Russians are essentially at peak capacity. There is not going to be some sort of gas rescue coming. I think those that expect Nord Stream 2 to be some sort of panacea right away, it's not. There are a lot of mid to long-term transitional issues in Russian gas exports, some geopolitical, some not. But the Europeans are in a jam. Just to give you a perspective from the Russian side of things, maybe a little different for some of you looking from inside Russia, looking out on the rest of the world. In the black here is domestic supply, and this is kind of finger to the wind. These are rough numbers of the first half of the year, assuming that the second half of the year looks the same, winter in the first quarter, spring in the second quarter, and then this is summer if you can call it that, followed by fall and winter. In the pinky red, this is Western Europe share for Gazprom, and this is all pipeline gas. This doesn't include Novatek's LNG business out of the Yamal, which is becoming quite substantial. The gray represents exports into Central Europe primarily. Ukraine is no longer a market per se for Russian gas. Belarus is, but countries like Poland and other countries in Eastern Europe. You see the role of Turkey and the so far still quite minor role of pipeline gas from Russia to China. It's going to become more of a factor and a big factor in LNG.
David, a quick question, definitional issue. What is Nord Stream 2?
Okay, so over the last decade, Russia had essentially a Russian-German consortium through Russian initiative has been building trunk line natural gas pipelines under the Baltic Sea, direct from the western shores of Russia near St. Petersburg to the North Sea shores of northern Germany. The first Nord Stream 1 was completed maybe 7 or 8 years ago, 55 billion cubic meters of capacity. Nord Stream 2, also 55 billion cubic meters of capacity through pipes. So now there are 4 pipes running parallel under the Baltic Sea, direct from Russia to Germany. As Russia reconfigures its export profile from the Russian perspective, moving away from dependence on transit states. Transit states being Ukraine, Poland, and wanting to deal direct with the big market for them, Germany. Another factor is the steady and significant decline in gas production in Western Europe. It's anticipated that the total market demand for Russian gas will continue to increase as Norway is essentially plateaued and will plateau for a long period of time. But it's going to be the Russians and LNG that cover the incremental increase in demand and considerable decrease in supply. Does that cover it, Dan?
It does. And if I could ask another question on something you just mentioned, you said Ukraine is not really a market for Russian gas. Obviously understandable in terms of the political stuff going on. But when that happens, is there an occurrence of transshipment from one country through another? So could Ukraine still end up getting Russian gas, or does that just not happen?
For sure, that is happening. So for one, there's still through 2024 a transit agreement between Gazprom and Ukraine to ship gas through the old Soviet pipe network to Europe. That contract is in place through 2024. The Ukrainians, subsequent to the Maidan and the Crimea and East Ukraine crisis, have said that they will not directly import and use Russian gas. And so they have about half to or so of Ukraine's gas demand is covered by domestic production. The rest is imported, and that is reverse flows from Europe that are part Russian gas, part Algerian, part LNG, but it's just for the rough discussion's sake, probably half of the gas that comes back to Ukraine through western borders is originally was produced in Russia.
Interesting.
Oh yeah, a lot of fun stuff, and it's really important to pay attention to what actually goes on, because talk is cheap, and there's a lot of it. There's a lot of political posturing going on, and for the world of business, these are the most fascinating and challenging times, because geopolitics have to be part of the boardroom discussion now as never before. And I would say that in the working life of the executives of the world today, they've never experienced what we've entered, this period that we've entered. So supply challenges. So the Russians have had their own, a big explosion and fire at a gas condensate separation facility at Novi Urengoy. The Russians started up a new facility that was supposed to take care of the capacity lost. This is around 8 to 10 billion cubic meters of capacity lost at a most inconvenient time of the year. Another August event in Russia. But the new plant has been slow. Clearly, there are teething problems. Gas flow through the Yamal pipeline into Poland and Germany has been inconsistent, rather oddly so. And that's hampered the ability of Gazprom to rebuild its storages in Western Europe, because the shortfall in flows through that Yamal pipe have been compensated for. Those contracted supplies are coming out of Gazprom storages in Western Europe. So Norway is also a big part of the European gas market. Not as big as Russia, but it's a very big player. And the gas flows have been weak, somewhat seasonal, but we're getting pretty late in the maintenance season. And this would be a really good time for, the Norwegians, why couldn't they surge some extra supply into Europe? Well, they're running at capacity as well. Just coming here quick to the US, and a decade ago, the United States and Europe and Asia were really separated as gas markets. The arrival of LNG to the world, to the United States as well, has increasingly integrated what used to be separate gas markets. Here in the United States, we're coming, come all the way over to the right side of the graphic here. The Henry Hub pricing has crossed $5 here in recent days, which is we're at the high for, essentially the high for the shale gas period. So, for the fellow that's got Marcellus activities, this is a good time to pay down debt. It's also an interesting time to consider whether to put some extra frac spreads to work, and do some drilling, and not just, put the drilled but uncompleted wells into play. This is a time for some bold action, I would say, and I would be leaning probably forward on investing rather than just strictly paying back shareholders. One thing I want to point out here is this price spike, and that's due to the Texas freeze-off in February. That there is a narrative that got loose in part of the American political culture that the electricity crisis in Texas was caused by wind shortfalls. That's not true. It was a gas problem. Part of it was aging gas facilities didn't perform well when it got really cold. But another problem was the gas production facilities, the field facilities, when you produce natural gas, comes up with water and other gases, but water being the key one. And if it's not handled correctly, and it's an issue to handle at all times, but when it gets really cold, and it got down in the teens for long stretches, that water freezes in the pipes and it shuts the wells down, and so a freeze off. And that resulted in a dramatic collapse in gas production. Then there was a feedback effect of the blackouts rolling across Texas, which hit some fields which were powered by electricity. So you had this weird feedback effect. But the price spike for natural gas was as wild and crazy as it was in electricity.
Hey, David, a question on that. Was the Texas situation of the natural gas infrastructure not being able to deliver when it got so cold, was that simply a function of decisions having been made not to, for want of a better term, winterize those facilities because it was thought, well, it's never going to get this cold?
Yeah, so I want to make a distinction here. It wasn't so much a factor of delivery, it was production. It was right in the fields. And to compensate for that, the storages were heavily impacted all through the South Plains. So this freeze-off issue hit not only Texas, but it also hit Louisiana. It hammered New Mexico, Oklahoma, got up into Kansas as well. So back in 2011, there was a cold event that hit hard, and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission issued a heavy report warning that shocks like this would happen again, and that it was important for the energy sector, electricity, gas production, to winterize. But no meaningful action took place. Part of the problem is the way the Texas power structure is run. Maintenance has been a real sore point for Texas power generation. Again, these are tending to be older facilities that require work. But the lack of winterization really hammered home. And what really is annoying from a strategic perspective is that this was not a surprise. It's happened before. It'll happen again. And the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas did a nice report a few weeks ago, maybe a couple months now, detailing the costs that were incurred, the economic costs versus what the cost of what the winterizing would have been, and the payback on winterizing was enormous. But it's something that is a factor only from time to time. And, it's like racing a train to the crossing, a lot of times you can make it, but if you don't, good luck. Well, and the publicity was for the people of Texas, deaths, yes. Horrific economic damage. The economic and human damage in New Mexico was pretty serious as well. But the lessons of 2011 were not learned, and it'll be interesting to see if the lessons of this year were, because it had international consequences. And I'm going to jump ahead. That's going to roll here with time being a bit of a factor. Hurricane Ida has thrown another spanner into the works. Hurricane Ida came through the powerful storm, nearly a Category 5, came up through the center of the Gulf of Mexico, crossed the Luke Current, really went into overdrive, and on August 29th came ashore, wrecked Foucheron port. Probably pronounced that wrong right at the moment. But what's interesting is, this data here on the right side, this is from yesterday. So now we're 2 weeks on from the hurricane, yet in the Gulf of Mexico, almost 800,000 barrels are still offline, oil production, and over nearly 1.2 billion cubic feet a day. That's, let's say a little over 1% of US supply, but it's an important amount, that 1%, in terms of how it affects the ability to recharge storage. And again, we're going into winter, I'll bet on the light side, and with the tremendous demand for gas shipments abroad, and solid demand here in the United States, it's a sustained hit. Got lucky with Nicholas. Guys in Houston can probably say something about whether any of the, how the flooding was in Northeast Texas or not. But the impact from Ida has been sustained, and the really long-term damage to the oil field services facilities in southeast Louisiana. Just a quick look here at the LNG exports out of the United States. It gives you an idea, in terms of the weight, the draw of LNG on U.S. gas supplies. Add to it about the same band is U.S. pipeline gas exports to Mexico. Very big business. It's basically the same size as U.S. LNG exports. And U.S. LNG exports, U.S. exports have gotten to be the size now where pricing activity in the export field feeds back into the domestic market. And this is something that's bothered me for a long time. It's something the Australians have experienced already in Eastern Australia. But as the U.S. has pushed, as gas has pushed coal out of the power generation market, U.S. power sector is increasingly dependent on natural gas in a big way. And consumers, industrial, household are quietly exposed to these pricing volatilities being imported through the LNG channel. And so the Henry Hub pricing of $5 is becoming a has become a headwind in the power sector for sure. It's very quietly, coal has clawed back several percentage points of its market share because of the high gas prices, and that looks to continue for some time. I don't see this as a kind of a short-term spike. I think this is a tidal rise for a time. U.S. LNG destinations, geopolitics fills the newspaper with, in the airwaves with talk, but commerce, commercial considerations, it's funny how that really comes to the fore. And despite U.S. Chinese relations, and this has been a surprise to me actually, is to the degree that the Chinese have been willing to stay engaged with the U.S. gas LNG market. But that all said, you can see that the three leading consumers of U.S. LNG are in Asia. You can see the Brazil, and this is a factor of the drought. The darker green are European markets. They're significant in aggregate, make no mistake, but there are limits. Poland is kind of the big crossroads between commerce and geopolitics and the LNG trade on the European side. So, guys in the gas trade world are always well, they've got their taste in humor. But certainly what's going on in the trading world, the action is in Europe, not so much in the United States. So in Europe, electricity prices have just taken off. And this is probably new information for many, if not most of the people on the call. So, I mean, what's the reference point here? The reference point, let me get my screens off here. So in 2019, 2020, you're looking at somewhere between 30 to 40 euros a megawatt hour. Spain at 154, France 140, Netherlands, Belgium, Germany 140, Italy 148. Eastern Europe, even in the coal heavy countries, with gas being the incremental fuel, if you will, you can see that the impact of high gas prices, high natural gas prices, has fed through to the electricity sector in a very big way. So essentially, prices have tripled. And after today's movements in the gas prices, we're heading toward a quadruple in electricity prices in just a few months. There's not a lot of solace to be found in switching from gas to coal. I mean, coal is still a big part of electricity production in Germany, in particular, in Central Europe. But you can see the pricing for coal has been very strong. Same, so I'm going to go back. So this is 2012 to 2021. This is basically a 10-year chart. It's a big move, unusual. In China, prices are at 13-year highs for coal. In Europe, the electricity prices have begun to feed through to the political sector. Bills are going to be delivered now, starting now, and through the next couple quarters. And they're going to be really high. They're going to be a big surprise, and not the kind of surprise that people like to get. A lot of the COVID job subsidy, welfare support, if you want to call it that. A lot of those state supports are falling away at a time when electricity prices are exploding. And so yesterday, interesting, essentially the Italian environmental minister was brought out to explain the price increases that are coming. And they're talking about, for the third quarter, price increase of 40%. And of course, with gas prices going up 7% today, this is a rather more immediate crisis than what's going on with the climate, and is going to totally make a mess of the policy making and discussions in that sector. But this is a political crisis is emerging, but even more to the point is what will hit the household sector and the corporate sector. In Spain yesterday, so you got this announcement yesterday in Italy about electricity prices. Yesterday, the Spanish Prime Minister comes out personally and announces that the tax that they put on electricity bills is going to be cut from 5.1 to 0.5%, anything to ease the impact of those soaring prices. It seems that, kind of lucky that you have an executive decision here. You don't have to run it through Parliament, but ultimately the world of politics politicians are going to have to explain to the public what's going on because the public is going to demand it. Just coming here to the end and looking forward, in Europe, United States, Latin America, Asia, these gas markets are tied together. Some are more vulnerable to the situation than others. Obviously, Europe is the center of this particular storm. Yes, it will enhance existing inflation trends. As discussed earlier, the cost pressures are evident everywhere. The world of logistics has gone to hell in a handcart. The price of shipping containers from Asia to the United States, to the West Coast of the United States, it costs 4 times as much as it did at the beginning of the year. I mean, it's really mind-bending what's going on, and the delivery times are lagged. Boats are sitting at LA Long Beach at Anchorage for up to 2 weeks. Some are coming in quickly, but many are sitting out there for a week or two. So this hit to the increase in electricity costs, that's where people will see it primarily. The impact of natural gas pricing feeding through electricity costs is going to hit consumer disposable income. For poor people, they don't have a lot of disposable income to be hit by, and there's for many there's no margin for reallocation, if you will. So one of the things that's going to happen this winter is millions and millions and millions of people are going to be choosing to how cold can they take it, and cold for a few hours, okay, you put some clothes on, add some blankets to the bedding and all, you can deal with it. But when it goes on for days and weeks and it rolls into basically a month-long experience, the political implications get really interesting. The psychological implications also, and how that affects politics. So it can, the pressures that this causes, the pressures of this gas electricity cost shock can emerge in different ways in terms of protest or outrage, whatever. It would be interesting to watch. In the corporate sector, the manufacturing world in Europe is in shock. It's less of a factor here in the United States. It's less of a factor in Asia and Latin America, but to the degree that companies are dependent on electricity, rather than gas, those that are dependent on electricity are going to feel the shock. Those that use gas in their manufacturing, it'll be significant. But European manufacturers in particular really face some very intense headwinds. Probably you'll see it for several quarters at minimum. Even if there's a warm winter, it's going to take time for this to blow over. I suspect that the back end of this spike is going to be a real collapse. It usually happens that way. But how wide the shoulders are, if you will, on this experience is something to pay attention to. You know, we're just coming into winter. It's not clear if it's going to be cold or not. You know, we're going to find out. A warm or mild winter would be really good news. But if, you know, with we have a La Nina condition again this year, if the winter is similar, even close to similar what happened last year, we could have some really scary stuff that happens this winter. One of the interesting things that's popped up in discussion in gas trading, gas professional circles in the last few days has been the prospect for gas demand destruction. Well, yeah, and you know, if you need to switch supplies, fine. What I worry about that's implied in this demand destruction thing, and I'm hearing the same kind of language coming out of the world of logistics, people in LA Long Beach saying, gosh, you know, if we could just have a slackening of the flow, we could catch up. Well, that's not, in some circles, they call that a recession. So I think that would be a really inconvenient way to get gas, to get demand destruction, but it may end up being that comes to pass. Certainly is a revival of coal demand. A lot of mines have been shut all around the world, and not just because of environmental reasons, but certainly 3 months ago, the world of ESG investing was all about how do you not participate in the coal business. Well, and in Europe, in Germany, at the end of December, there are plans to close 3 of Germany's fleet of nuclear power plants. That it'll be interesting to see how all what is coming to pass and what's just started, how that affects German politics with an election coming in, you know, later this month. It'd be interesting to see how that new government, when it's finally formed, deals with the implications for Germany's nuclear sector. You know, and quietly back at the ranch, you know, well, you know, France has a very strong, very large nuclear electricity generation sector, and because of the focus on extending the life of those facilities, it turns out that the French power production, nuclear power production, is up 8, almost 10% over what it was last year. So you could imagine where Europe, north of the Pyrenees and on, would be without that increase in nuclear generation. But in addition to that wind experience that the UK is going through now, this has been a terrible year for wind production in Germany, and currently another episode of low wind. They're looking to be generating around 5 gigawatts here which is about half of what they would normally be doing at this time of year, which is about 10% of the installed capacity. So, and this came to my attention a couple months ago when first half reports started coming out of German power companies and really weak results. Why? Because of poor wind conditions. Well, that was an eye opener, and that's being sustained. Just the impact of all of this. There's the COP26 talks are due in Scotland here shortly about how the world is going to continue. Europe and the world are going to continue to evolve the global energy transition to from fossil fuel dependency to a low, no carbon future. This is going to take place in an enormous storm, and I have to wonder if anything consequential comes out of that meeting. It's a real headache. I don't know where you all stand on this. Basically, we're conducting an enormous experiment in global geochemistry. There will be really serious impacts coming out of this to the climate, to the environment, to the global habitats. And it's important that we make this transition that will take time. But this is all being complicated by what's happening now. So thank you all for your time and attention. I welcome any questions now that I've run long.
Well, it was a stunning collection of facts and interrelationships, David, as always.
Yeah, thank you, David. One quick question. What capacity does the U.S. have to make up via LNG exports to Europe that might be, available to them?
My understanding is that U.S. LNG is operating at capacity. That the United States has no excess capacity to contribute to Europe. What's going on is a tug of war between price indexes, the Japan Korea index, and say the TTF. It's a tug of war between the markets in Asia and the markets in Europe over who gets call on US LNG. And so far, the Asians are paying the price that Europe has yet to decide to pay for LNG. And even then, it takes time to reorient, destination of boats. So I think the short answer really is there's not much the U.S. can do.
Yeah. Follow-on question. I know there's been in France and in some of the other countries, some sort of distaste that they didn't want to have, U.S. natural gas because it's shale natural gas. And so do you see that as a lasting theme, or is that going to go away just because of need?
I think it's going to be a lasting theme. Europe has decided to forego the opportunities offered by shale. Shale has its own limitations. That's really another topic for another discussion. Shale gas is a very different world than traditional gas production. Very capital intensive. The great shale boom in the US is over. The question is how long the tail will be. This will be a bigger discussion here in the United States than in Europe. The big one is going to be for the Europeans after, the European Investment Bank earlier this year said it wouldn't invest in any gas projects and refused to consider gas distribution improvement networks in Romania and elsewhere. Europeans are going to have to understand the challenges that come with renewables and the role of dispatchable power that's historically dependent on fossil fuels or nuclear, or in a rare case, geothermal, but really it's fossil fuels and nuclear that provide that dispatchable, which I mean, it means you flick a switch and you get something. With renewables, it's not necessarily so. And the environmental community, into a substantial part, and much of the political community and the public led along by this, really understand part of the world of renewables without getting the whole picture. There's a lot of cherry picking going on. And on the denier side, there's just as much cherry picking. But Europe will have to choose what supporting dispatchable source it will be, either gas or nuclear. The renewables, you know, and the discussion of batteries, don't get me started. But it's an interesting question. Hey, David, you ask.
Has France ever had any major nuclear accident? And if not, is this current situation in any way putting pressure on them to loosen any of their requirements, which could then cause some accidents?
No, you know, the facilities are conservatively run, unlike the wild experiment that went on at Chernobyl, or the
Fukushima.
Some of the utilities in the United States, where, forgive me guys and gals, where financial management has takes precedence over engineering and operations. The French nuclear power sector is professionally run. I'm not aware of any major accidents there, certainly not in recent decades. The power sector there has been very smoothly and consistently run. I don't like pressurized water technology, but that's a topic for another day. There are other ways to do it, but they're not pushing. I mean, there's just, they're in fact improving the quality of operation, the consistency of operation.
Yeah, having lived in France for 20 years, there's been no accident, and there's a huge public support for nuclear energy. It's considered the sort of one of their national treasures, and from a national security standpoint, they put a lot of money into it. So I don't see them backing off in any way, shape, or form on nuclear. In fact, I see them doubling down. I see them doubling down on it.
Huh. That's good. Good news.
It's interesting that, you know, the France 24 did a piece just earlier this week on the new thorium test reactor in China, and I was appalled by the anti-nuclear, very, I mean, it was shoddy reporting from a journalistic perspective, but it was also slanted. So there's the traditional roots of France are soberly supportive of nuclear, and everyone in France is now getting a live education in power economics. So I think it's a helpful thing, and France is actually quite fortunate in this circumstance to be protected from both the in terms of supply, but again, pricing. The French are experiencing the pricing problems that everyone else is, which is complicating. Robert, thanks for your perspective on that. Thank you.
David, can I ask a question? I mean, the presentation, which is a brilliant presentation, by the way, is obviously focused on the short-term kind of like inflationary pressures within kind of like energy production. But if you look at more long-term, and you look at countries like China and Japan, large parts of Europe and other parts of the world, which are now experiencing quite a significant drops in fertility, leading to kind of like shrinking populations. I think China itself is projected to potentially halve its population in the next 50 years or something. India's fertility rate is slowing very dramatically, below kind of like replacement level, I think, going forward. And there are plenty of gas and other supplies being discovered all the time, plus renewable technology is taking a bigger share year on year of kind of like energy production around the world. And with that, technology goes a long way. I mean, the wind turbines of today are far more productive than the wind turbines that were first built. So taking all that into account, and I know you made a throwaway remark about battery technology, but even those have come a long way and are continuing to go a long way. And there are potentially kind of like hydrogen coming on stream at some point in the future to tackle a lot of this energy dependency that we have. So long term, do you think that these are what you're describing is potentially an interim or a short term blip, but long term the energy situation looks more promising as global demand will drop in the next 20 years quite significantly, I think, from different parts of the world?
You've asked a series of very, very big questions, and demographics are a central part of any of the answers, and all the answers, quite honestly. I mean, they are a crucial part of the equation, and the energy transition from fossil fuel, carbon intensive, to non-carbon or low carbon intensive power sources. I mean, that's where things are going to go. And it will go faster if the price. Wow. So for the next decade, we live in interesting times, at least for the next decade. I think one of the transition in Asia, let's take China, for example, leaving the world of coal, 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago in the winter, China walked right up to the edge of die-offs, like what took place a couple times around the London fogs in the 50s and 40s, or Donora, Pennsylvania, where thousands of people died overnight because of air pollution. China walked up to the edge of that and made strategic decisions to refit the whole municipal heating systems of the North China Plain and move from coal to gas. That transition is well underway, and so the world of air pollution is changed in China. It's not that the threat of those kinds of horrific government changing impacts could take place, but there are multiple transitions going on quietly. One of the discussions that's going to emerge, say, in Russia, which is the world's largest, it's the second largest producer of natural gas after the United States. US somewhere around 1 trillion cubic meters per year. The Russians produce around 600 billion, and then the follow-on is fall away is very fast to other producers. But Russia's the largest, has the largest reserves of traditional gas reserves, and the frackable reserves are in way beyond that, but that's another discussion. The thing that's going to be discussed in Russia in gas circles this year and into next is going to be the emerging end. The Russians, for the first time, will be able to see the end of their national resource. The last, one of, maybe not quite the last, but the next to last great waves of supergiant fields in the north, the western Siberia and the Arctic are now in process to develop the world's largest LNG, prospectively the world's largest LNG industry over the next decade. Russia is about 50% dependent on gas for all of its energy needs. Europe is very much dependent on that, and Russia is dependent on those exports to pay the bills for its domestic network, because the price of gas in Russia is about $70 for 1,000 cubic meters, and normally it's 200, 300 in Western Europe, a lot more now. For the world of gas analysis, the end of gas, you can see it. It's at the horizon now, and it's about the physical realities of gas, less than policy making. One of the things that policymakers in California, I can tell you it's starting here now, this last year, and very much this summer, reality is beginning to emerge in the power sector about how this transition is going to work. And it's going to take time. It's going to cost a lot of money, and there's no shortcuts. If you take the corner too fast, you'll roll the car. And to take a shortcut across the swamp, it's just a damn fool thing. Amar, you ask a series of gigantic questions. But I think the scale of your questions, the time scale, is probably a couple generations worth. And the world of energy will be able to respond rather smoothly, I think, to the demographic changes. It will be the changes of technology and policy making. This has been a crazy couple of years. Because again, last year in the summer, this time, the summer, July, cargoes were being canceled by the dozens, LNG cargoes off the southern US Gulf Coast. US production was in free fall. And I would say a majority of US LNG capacity was offline last summer. And this summer, you can't get enough of it this fall. So give me a call. We'll do it. We'll do a full presentation on that. But I will tell you that in London, you have a front row seat for the real deal. These are not academic discussions. That you're going to live it in real life about how to transition and what the ruthless role of physics and engineering and planning. Good luck to you. Everybody got quiet. I mean, we did blackouts here last summer in California, and you know, California in the daytime, we have so much solar power, we don't know what to do with it. In fact, prices regularly crash to zero. Not a good thing if you're an investor in solar power, honestly. But that's the reality of it. And maybe we could transmit it somewhere or convert it into hydrogen. Coming back to the hydrogen thing, Nice piece of data. If all the world's wind and solar were applied to making hydrogen today, that would be roughly what's called the gray hydrogen, what fossil fuel produced hydrogen is now. So the scaling of these interesting ideas, even if they're economic, and the road to being economic will take decades, the scale is enormous. But in California, with the solar production at daytime, it's a fascinating thing when the sun goes down. And we're just coming off another hot summer here. 100 degrees here where I live the last few days, and we run the air conditioning basically from mid-morning and deep into the evening, long after the sun goes down. So that when the solar power goes away, California imports electricity from surrounding states and produces electricity from gas. But because of the cheap power in the middle of the daytime from solar, the economics of those fossil facilities have been wrecked. So we're really in an interesting time. And last summer, managing that transition, that evening transition, was fumbled a couple days in August, and they had rolling blackouts in the state of California. And the response to that and worries about blackouts now is that companies and people have been buying diesel generators hand over fist. So fun stuff.
David, I think that may be a good place to end it. You left us with an interesting thought, an interesting expression of it, that the next couple of decades are going to be a rocky road, and if we try to cut corners, we could have an accident. If we try to take a shortcut across the swamp, I think is how you worded it, we could have equally bad accidents. So a lot of food for thought.
Thank you all for your time and
Dave,
attention. And Dan, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you, and Fang.
Sure, and thanks for a great fact-filled presentation. Really good stuff. Just a couple of final closing. Charlotte will let us know about the availability of the recording. Be sure to get, if you need CPE credit, be sure to get your stuff into Jim Carr. Just a final reminder, keep your health and yourselves safe. Keep your families safe. Do what you can to keep society safe and to combat any misinformation that may be out there going in the opposite direction.